Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world to share their insight and expertise so we can all grow together. I am your host, Heidi Schalk, and the co-founder of the Spotlight to Scale Accelerator, where we help companies drive revenue by increasing their visibility to showcase their authority and be seen as the go-to expert in their industry versus just another product and service. And today, it's going to be such a fun conversation. I am joined by Kelly Leonard with The Second City. So welcome, Kelly, to the podcast.
I am happy to be here, Heidi.
I am just as happy and excited for this conversation. I've done a little theater locally in my day, so I love that we're going to dive into this and relate and see how it relates to business. So, Kelly, can you kick us off by sharing a little bit about who you are, The Second City, what your company is, and your role within it?
Sure. So I traditionally have the longest title at Second City. I don't know why that has happened. It's probably, some inadequacy on my part. But my title right now is Vice President of Creative Strategy, Innovation, and Business Development for the Second City. But I started here in 1988 as a dishwasher. So I've kind of done it all. I did the dishwashing for just a little bit, worked in the box office. I became the producer of Second City in 1992. And for those who don't know Second City, we're a sketch comedy and improvisation theater. We started in 1959. We're known for producing incredible talent. So before I got here, people like Alan Arkin, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, Robert Klein, Fred Willard, Joan Rivers, John Belushi, Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, John Candy. I could go on.
Yeah.
My first cast, when I became the producer in 1992, included Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, and Amy Sedaris. And then I hired Tina
Wow.
Fey and Amy Poehler and Rachel Dratch and Keegan-Michael Key and Jason Sudeikis and a host of folks. I did that until about 2015, 2016, when I co-wrote the book Yes And, which was about how we take our improv principles into businesses and organizations to help them be more innovative, more creative, to lead better, to have more effective teams. And so first part of the career, improv on stage. Second part of the career, improv off stage. And if it surprises people that we do all that stuff real quickly, our origins actually start in the 20s and 30s at Jane Addams Hull House on the south side of Chicago. There was a social worker by the name of Viola Spolin, and her job was to better assimilate the immigrant children and neighborhood children into her care. So she created all these improv games, these exercises that allowed them to collaborate and play together and communicate. A lot of these exercises were in gibberish because the kids didn't always share language. And Viola's son, Paul Sills, was studying at the University of Chicago, loved these games, taught them to his friends, Alan Arkin, Elaine May, Mike Nichols, Barbara Harris, among others. They formed the first improvisational theater in America called the Compass Players. That's in 1955. That morphs into the Second City, which opens in 1959. So yeah, we're a world famous comedy theater that got really started by a social worker. So you can kind of see how all those things maybe meld together into what we are now, which is, a comedy theater with the largest school of improvisation in the world and a thriving corporate division that, works with Fortune 500 companies all over the world.
Wow. You shared just a tidbit because I was on your website. I
Yeah.
was diving deep, checking it. You have a ton more that you haven't even mentioned
Yeah.
that have gone through your theater, which is really, really incredible. You have so many legendary comedians that have come through Second City. So why do you think it's such a powerful training ground for talent?
Because of improv. So improvisation is a fantastic way to grow comedic talent, but it's not just that. Because really what improvisation is the recreation of human behavior. We don't get to practice very often how we are human in the world, which means better listening, better responding, very pro-social concepts. So the philosophy of improvisation is we got each other's back. There's a ritual that we do every time before we go out on stage, or every time before there's a workshop when there's a couple of us, we tap each other on the back and say, got your back. And that might seem, I don't know, small, but meaning is made in moments. And so you have this moment where someone you physically and verbally and emotionally and spiritually tell this person, I got you. And it changes the way you approach. And when you're improvising on stage, you have no script. All you have is each other.
Right.
So when you understand that all you have is each other, you are going to behave in fantastic ways. Now, just imagine that that's what happened in the office, because mostly it doesn't.
Right. I was just going to say, I could see how that is so important in the work environment because, especially when it maybe in sales teams, especially like you feel that they're competing against each other to be top leaderboard. When if they actually came together as a team supporting each other, it would elevate everybody, which would elevate the company in return. So I totally get that. And it takes trust, right? And to
Yeah.
have that on stage and to have that in the office environment is key because when you have trust within your team internally, guess who else is going to trust you much easier because it's going to emulate on the outside with potential clients and new clients, right?
Yeah. So I host our podcast, Getting to Yes And, which was sort of kicked off after the book came out. And well, it's not every once in a while, often I'll book a guest. I'll have no idea what's inside this book. Just interviewed Wes Adams and Tamara Miles, who have a book called Meaningful Work. About halfway through the book, the chapter on trust starts with Second City. So it was great because I was able to talk about, they knew a little bit about improvisation, did some research, but found out like, of course, improvisers have to build that kind of trust. Again, no script, but also it goes beyond that. It's the ability to galvanize the best of human beings working together. And like we do, unless you're doing like group activity or sports or theater, you're not very well versed in how to work in groups effectively. That's not something that's necessarily taught to you. And even the examples I gave are extracurricular.
Yeah.
It's maybe a project like once, in 4 years of learning. But in our work, it's all about that. And you talked earlier about, what makes great performers. And yes, it makes great performers on stage. But if you think about all these famous people who came out of Second City, they took their friends with them. So you look everything from Mary Tyler Moore, Cheers, 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, Curb Your Enthusiasm, you name it. They're just the producers, the writers, the actors. They're all Second City people. They speak the same language. They know they can have that kind of shortcut. And it's an amazing skill to have. It's also, this is the thing, like people often ask me, like, comedian's difficult. And, of course, like nobody got into comedy because they're well adjusted. Like I'll give you that. But I can count on one hand the amount of assholes. It's not long. It's that, and that is, I've worked here 37 years. It is a small group of people because the system doesn't allow it. The idea of what you do when you are on that stage with your group and you're probably together only like 2.5 years, 3 years, it's kind of everything flows in and out. You've got to be able to work well with someone because you rely on them every single night. And if you don't, it becomes readily apparent. So the cool thing is, when I came here and I was washing those dishes, the people on stage at that time were Mike Myers, Jane Lynch, Bonnie Hunt.
Wow, Jane Lynch.
Yeah, Chris Farley and Tim Meadows had just been hired in the touring company. And it felt like magic when you're watching it. And then, you work here for a while, to realize it's not magic. It's like yoga for your social skills. This is just, I often say it's loud, noisy group mindfulness. It's a practice in being unpracticed. And then you start to get it and you're like, oh, and so I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to see for nearly 4 decades it continue to work. Decade after decade, and I'm not hiring people anymore, still working. I didn't hire people before me. It was working then. So what is it other than the training that they all get and then their ability to apply it in front of audiences night after night after night? And if you talk to, stand-up comics talk about this all the time, and we don't do stand-up, we do improv and sketch. But stand-up comics, Chris Rock will go play open mics for no money just because he has to hone his craft. And a funny story about him too is he, at a certain point, he became so successful, he knew that just by using his Chris Rock cadence, he'd get laughs. So then he'd start delivering his material in monotone and see if it worked. And so it's amazing the sort of tricks and nudges we have to give ourselves over time, because often I speak at a lot of innovation and creativity conferences, and everyone's like, what's the biggest barrier to creativity and innovation? And for me, it's success. It's my past success, because I know that people just assume and will often, okay, yeah, we'll buy a ticket to that. They Second City produced it. And you can't live on that and grow. You can't live on that and be able to take risks. And I don't know, I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I was given the gift of pivoting in my career here. And yes, it was my choice. And I recognize that a lot of people don't get that choice. But even then, it was a scary choice because I had my thing and no one was going to stop. No one was going to take my thing away from me. But had I not done that nearly 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been sitting here talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that you shared there, and I love that one thing you said was they take each other with them, which we do see. You see
Yeah.
a lot of the movies with the comedians, and they're all binding together, and you see the same people in the same specific movies with the same character, same actors,
Yeah.
and or comedians, and I think that's fantastic that they do
Hmm.
that, and it's actually such a small world, right? When
Hmm.
there's a lot of different successful comedians out there, but it is such a small community, and they're supportive of each other. They have each other's back, which is important because I'm sure on stage, we're human. People can blank, and it's
Yeah.
nice to know that your team person, right? Your person's got
Gonna
you.
jump right in.
Come right
Yeah.
in and help you and the boat rises together, right?
Mhm.
And just your longevity of where you've been and the growth that you've taken, and like you said, scary, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you felt like they were risky, but growth doesn't happen by staying the same. Growth doesn't happen by staying in your comfort zone, like you were talking about. And I love that they're honing their skills constantly. They don't success could put you be great. I made it. I'm making a lot of money. Like I'm successful. I get the laughs. I'm good at what I do. And then people can just stay there. But what happens is then they slowly disappear, right? Because you've got to
Yeah.
keep giving audiences new things, keeping it fresh and trying. And I think that's a big lesson to learn for leaders and businesses is that you don't want to just stay where you are. You want to consistently start growing, and everything's about pivoting, possibly evolving and seeing where you can go next.
So one
But
one of the biggest things we hear from our clients, and I also hear it from my wife, who is a professor, an academic, is how do I get my people comfortable with being uncomfortable? This is increasingly a problem. And I'm not saying boundaries are bad. Boundaries are good. And for those of us that are the generation that powered through everything, maybe not always the best decision in our lives. However, a credo of Second City is making mistakes work for you, seeing all obstacles as gift, becoming comfortable with discomfort because the good stuff happens there. So we're really good at coming into businesses and doing low stakes improv exercises that are a little uncomfortable, but then they do it and they didn't die.
right.
Okay.
I
So
made it
like,
through.
and let's do that again. And let's do it again. And by the end of the workshop, they will do whatever. And so I think we have to like get out of we talk about the idea of replacing blame with curiosity. Get out of your blame brain. Teach these people, give them skills building in becoming comfortable inside this discomfort. And so my wife, Ann, she's every parent's nightmare. She runs the first ever BA in comedy writing and performance. It's a comedy major. Her first graduate class had 80 Bryant. And she is teaching these people to be professional comedians and giving them sort of comedy cross training. And a lot of that is recognizing that you have to put yourself in really uncomfortable positions to get your material. So whether it's sort of a practice in journaling or giving them prompts to have conversations with strangers, or we've worked with behavioral scientists at the University of Chicago. We had a program there for 4 years called the Second Science Project that looked at behavioral science through the lens of improvisation and vice versa. And so one of the scientists, Nick Epley, his research is on a lot about self-disclosure. Our unwillingness as human beings to disclose even minor details about ourselves because we think people don't care, when in fact, that is the starting point for all relationships. And so he did this great study where he sent graduate students out on public transportation in Chicago, and they had to fill out a form because their job was going to be to talk to strangers. And it was like, fill out a form about how uncomfortable you think this is going to be. And they're like, this is going to be terrible. Then they did it, and they came back and they filled out the form. They loved it. They made friends. They got phone numbers. It wasn't so bad. And Nick then asked us, because it was part of this project, he's like, could you invent an exercise that would allow individuals to practice what that experience was? So Anne created an exercise called Universal Unique. And the idea is you pair up two people. And this is a total example of what we do with a corporation or an organization. So you pair up two people, person A, person B, and you have a conversation about something banal like grocery shopping. And she says, all right, so for about a minute, talk to each other about how human beings grocery shop, just sort of high level. And you do that, and it's not very exciting. She goes, all right, I want you to take a beat and now think about how you grocery shop. Have that conversation. Completely changes the room. People are laughing. They find connections. Of course, because we're all freaks and we all have our weirdo things that we do when we grocery shop. And I always forget the bag. So when I do this exercise, I don't make it to the grocery store. So many other things have happened. But it reveals that if you do these low stakes revelations about yourself, people are interested. They care about you. And
Mm.
so self-disclosure can be a very powerful tool. And you can think about this in a leadership context, in a sales concept, in a team building sort of way. Look, if any endeavor involves human beings working with other human beings, our stuff works
Mm.
because that's what this is about.
So good. So can you share with us, Kelly, what are some new projects that you're working on, Second City's working on?
All right, so this is a weird one, but a pretty cool one. About 6 months ago, we got a call from Vince Delfonso, who is a retired FBI agent, a hostage negotiator. So Vince was the guy who got Captain Phillips released from the Somali pirates, among others. And he had seen a keynote that I had done during COVID, sort of online in a Zoom room. And I talk about negotiation and improvisation. He was very curious. So he invited us out to Quantico for a week, and my group went to Quantico. We had to pass background tests, which was touchy for a moment, but we passed them. And we got there and we observed classes, and then they basically said, "All right, take over this class." So we did, and we taught all these senior law enforcement at the FBI National Academy improv exercises that allowed them to practice a pivot or navigating ambiguity, storytelling. We touched on all these things. So we led a couple of these workshops, and they went over great. So Tuesday, in just a few days, I'm flying out to Baltimore with my team, and we're presenting at the National Hostage Negotiation Conference. So it's
Wow.
all law enforcement. And they basically, what we've already been warned, they're delivering gruesome case studies. That is basically what this thing is. And then these jerks from Second City are going to get up and talk about how you could use improvisation to practice the skills you need in a negotiation situation. So not a place I thought we'd ever, end up.
Right.
We're working with the University of Chicago Crime Lab, doing kind of the same things in some of their leadership programs with senior law enforcement. But yeah, if you had talked to, 22-year-old Kelly who was here and say, "Oh yeah, you're going to be working with cops," be like, "You're out of your mind." But what I love about this, and this is, I think, key to the moment in which you and I are speaking in the year of our Lord, 2025 in February, is the ability to speak through difference. These people don't have the same politics as I do. And you know what? We're not there to talk about that. What we're there to talk about is how we can help save other human beings.
Right.
And when you focus in on those kinds of issues and build connection, you then can build bridges and bonds. And I just, we live in a world where people are blocking and, don't want to have these conversations. And I get it. It's hard. But I do think essentially there are more things that bond us together than separate us. And so the ability to try to find those is at least maybe a starting point to getting and making things better. I don't know.
Yeah, that's beautifully stated, beautifully said, Kelly. I agree with you. There's much more that bonds us than separates us, and I think sometimes we focus too much on what's separating us versus what can bring us together and bond us. So I love what you're doing. What's one lesson from the world of improv that you think every business leader should learn?
Shut up and listen.
Mm.
Listening is a superpower, and it's not really shut up because actually the science says good listeners will interrupt for clarity. Good listeners will make noise to make sure the person knows they're there in the conversation. So I should be clear about that. But the power of deep, active listening is incredible because people know when you're listening to them and they know when you aren't. And I've had to give this note so often in a variety of scenarios as a leader, as a manager, as a consultant, all those things. And to say to people like, if your phone, your mobile phone is up between you and another person, you're reducing your listening. And guess what? Even if it's face down, you're reducing your listening. Put
Mm.
it aside. In improvisation, it's so much about your presence. You have to be fiercely present in the moment because when you're improvising, you can't live in the past or be in a future. You have to be there right now. And I remember there's a cognitive scientist by the name of Irving Yalom who had a phrase that just killed me when I saw it, which he says, sooner or later, you have to give up the hope for a better past. So many of us will live inside our past grievances, our past harms, past problems, and we bring that into a moment and it gets in the way of what we want to do and accomplish. We have precious few decades on this planet, and how do you want to spend them? And I want to spend them connecting with people, doing good, taking care of my people, but also taking care of as many people as I can. And that takes intention. It doesn't just happen because you want it. So I feel very blessed that I work at a place where I get to practice that on a daily basis and then bring it out. And I think if we all did that, I often say this in my talks, like, what do you think things would get better in the world if everyone listened 2% better? It would be
It
huge.
would be huge. Yeah. Just even like that, just that it doesn't sound like a
Tiny,
lot. It's a small percentage, but if everybody did it, the ripple effect would be massive.
enormous. And
Yeah.
so I think we can tackle that. That's the thing we should tackle.
I agree with you. I think I hear this from, I'm learning this too as I'm talking with, all my guests, and thank you for being on here as one of them, is that listening is key. And many people are listening to they're thinking about what to say after somebody's done talking versus being present in the moment and learning how to listen without worrying about what your response is. Because if you just trust that you'll have the right response and it'll come to you, because when you get all the information, then and you can pause. You don't have to respond.
The pause is great. People
The,
love the pause. It's like you're really listening to me and you have taken that time to respond. We have an exercise to teach this, which is called last word. And the exercise is where we have a conversation. There's one rule, which each of us has to start our reply with the last word the other person said.
Oh, that's good.
And it's hard because
Yeah.
it requires you to listen to the end, not be thinking about your thing, and then making whatever slight pivot. But when you do it and you're thoughtful, and again, it takes practice. But when you do it, you become so much more adept inside these conversations. I want to plug my friend Allison Woodbrooks, who's a professor at Harvard, and she has a new book it's called Talk, and it's about the art and science of conversation. And Allison's the best. And the book is such a terrific primer that can help people with little tips and techniques for having these better conversations. And one of her things that she does is she has her students at Harvard make a list of conversational topics, which they hate doing because they think it's cheating. And it's somehow going to be inauthentic. She goes, don't just write it down and then put it in your pocket. And by the way, you never have to take it out. And invariably, all the people who do that exercise, even if they don't take it out, it says it helped. I knew it was there. So I never had to worry about what I was going to talk about. And I focused in a whole different way instead of
Okay.
trying to impress someone.
That's a great exercise. Yeah. And
Mhm.
if they felt more secure because they knew it was there and they
Yeah.
had written it out. Yeah, that's amazing. So Kelly, can you share with us your company, the Second City has been around for a long time, since
Yep.
you said 1959?
5 years.
A long, long time. You've had a lot of people come through. So what are some challenges or one that you can think of that you all have faced as during your growth? And I'm sure you're still growing, you're still expanding. Like you said, now you're working with law enforcement, which you never
Yeah.
thought would happen. So what is a challenge or something that you guys have faced with Second City that you've overcome, and how did you do that?
I don't know that we've overcome this, but it's something we share with Saturday Night Live. So SNL just turned 50. And of course, when I did the math, I looked at how many of our people ended up at SNL either as writers and performers. It's 50. So
Wow.
it was hilarious. And and three from the first cast. So SNL by second year, not as funny as it used to be. Second City by its second year, not as funny as it used to be. How do you maintain relevance when you are an institution? So for us, that has meant taking risks and chances, doing things maybe that we wouldn't think we were going to do. We hire talent to take on institutions, to take shots at those in power, which also means uncomfortably to take shots at us. So building up the armor to be like, take your best shot, man. Go for it. Just don't lie. But if it's the truth, that's the truth. So that's a thing. For us, it's also been who could we collaborate with that would be sort of an unlikely partner. And one of my favorite stories about this was the night that the concierge at the Four Seasons contacted the box office and wanted to make reservations for Renee Fleming, the opera diva. And this guy didn't know who Renee Fleming was and didn't put him into our main stage theater, put him in our ETC theater. These are our two resident theaters. That wouldn't normally matter, except for the ETC show happened to be illegally sampling her voice throughout the entire show. And Renee comes up to our musical director, Jesse Case, afterwards, who's sweating bullets. And she's like, I'm not interested in suing you. I'm excited because I think there's an opportunity here. Jesse had my cards just in case anything like this would happen. Gave him my card. I went to coffee with Renee the next day, and we cooked up this idea of like what would happen if Second City, and Renee was then a consultant for the Lyric Opera Chicago. What if we played around for a year and saw what would happen? We built that program and ended up creating the Second City Guide to Opera, which was a huge hit that Renee and Sir
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart hosted, that we did on the big stage at Lyric Opera, and that turned into a cabaret show, and then we did classes with them, and all of this was out of a thing that anyone else would have been like, this is a terrible mistake. We're like, it is also a fantastic opportunity. So I
Yeah.
think the history of Second City is like looking at these curveballs and finding out a way to hit them. And we've been pretty good at that. But by no means 1,000%, but I think we're pretty around 300 hairs.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. What a good story. And it turned into something amazing and incredible. And I think that's a really important key point for takeaway for businesses. You're going to be thrown curveballs. Things are going to happen. Things are not going to go smoothly or perfect most of the time, especially if you're growing.
Yeah.
So you've got to take those curveballs and try and make, if you get like the saying, handed lemons, make some lemonade out of it, see what you can do. And again, communication. Right? You all were
Mhm.
open to her coming and having the conversation. She had an open mind and you were able to create magic from that. Who you work with businesses? We know that
Yep.
you work with talent, actors, and turn them into amazing, incredible comedians and
Mhm.
improvisation phenomenons. But you work with businesses. So who would be your ideal client in that space? So if we have a listener listening who owns a business and they're like, oh, maybe this would work for us, who would be your ideal client and how do you typically find businesses? Do they find you? Do you find them? Or do you
Yeah.
have any marketing things that you're specifically using that's working for you to attract these businesses to you?
Yeah, I'd say for the first couple decades of this business, if not the first 3 decades, it was picking up the phone. Because people, what would happen is someone's friend would take a class and they go, this thing is really good for team building. And then we get hired by, Facebook to come in and do. So tech has been huge for us. What we're finding now is that, and we work with all the Fortune 500 companies. Our logo list is so huge, and we've done stuff with the U.S. Army and NBA and Major League Baseball, and just so many different folks. And it's everything from orientation to leadership. Anytime you have human beings working with other human beings, and it's not going like you want it to, we can help because the barriers are likely the things that we've sort of talked about, that well, they're not communicating in all the ways that they can communicate. They're not understanding in all the ways they potentially could understand. They don't trust. They don't listen. And our exercises are they're embodied, right? So you're getting up and doing them. So it's not just this is the thing I know about. I read a lot of books. Reading a book won't change a behavior. But having a knowledge exchange followed by an embodied exercise where someone can feel the difference, that changes a behavior. So anyone looking for a sort of behavior change and making their people more creative, and here's the big one for us right now, which is in an AI-enabled world, what are the skills we're going to need for the future of work? And so if you look at the World Economic Forum list, out of that top 10, 7 of them are things that we teach at Second City, whether it's problem solving, storytelling, interpersonal relationships, again, listening, all those things. And that is where the focus seems to be going right now. So, yeah, we're everything from your retail group to your C-suite. I just had a really great conversation with Doug Leeds. So, Doug ran Ask.com, which used to be Ask Jeeves, for those of us who remember that. And he was talking about the fact that they had their best year. And he knew, he was reading the tea leaves. He's like, our business is not going the direction, it's going to go the other way. And challenged his people with coming up with new ideas. And no one came with any ideas. And he happened to be reading Tina Fey's Bossy Pants. He's like, well, what if I tried improv? Hired an improv teacher who took the whole leadership team through a workshop. They loved it. They had it, all 2,000 employees took improv, and they got the ideas. They made the shift, and it worked. And Doug is such a decided. So now he teaches at Berkeley and teaches innovation and leadership and uses improvisation. And I was like, this is such a great story because it's like, yes, for people who think it's impractical, it's the most practical. It is about getting peak performance, which doesn't happen with a carrot or a stick. There's no carrot, there's no stick. There's skills building. You're not going to get someone to be a better hitter without letting them practice hitting the ball. And that's what we
Right.
do.
So good. So I have one more question, two more
Yeah.
questions actually. What if I was able to hand you a magic wand and you could go poof and take away one thing, that one problem or one issue, one challenge that you're having right now with the business or company or marketing, whatever it is, what would that be and why?
Wow, that is a I wish I had that wand and then I have to decide what I'd want to do with it. I'm going to give you my answer.
Okay.
I would, and this is for the world. My magic wand would instantly make everyone take a beat before they do the thing that they're going to do.
Mm.
When I first met with my partner Heather Caruso at the University of Chicago to sort of design what became the Second Science Project, we were originally looking at like the South Side here in Chicago and saying, you look at the science of self-regulation, which is all about taking a beat before you do something bad. And what if we could give that skill to not just the cops, but the kids to do that? And so someone doesn't make a bad choice, that they know they have a chance to maybe do something different. And we have exercises that teach this. But that ability to get everyone to just like take a beat, take a pause, because then maybe you aren't going to do the thing that your nerves or your sadness or your grief or your trauma, whatever it is telling you need to do, that knee-jerk response, which is not going to be a good response. And so I think that that's a place that would give us space to do all the other things that we want to do. Because as I was thinking about your question, I'm like, yeah, we could say to everyone, like even out the hierarchy. We could say to everyone, again, like listen better. But, even before that, take a beat.
Yeah, that is such a great answer. I've not heard that answer yet. So thank you. That was amazing. And that's such a powerful practice. Take a beat, like
Hmm.
the pause, right? We talked about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, thank you. One last question. If we could bring you back on, Kelly, in a year, again, this is a new podcast, so thank you for being a yes to joining us. If we could bring
Hmm.
you back in a year and revisit this conversation, what would success look like for Second City and you?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I think, we look at some of our initiatives, all right? So we're just starting this work with law enforcement, and that gets cemented, that gets developed, we're ingrained, and it looks like that's where it's going. We're pitching a class to Kellogg in their MBA program, and it's a business class that focuses on trust and relationships. Because everyone we talked to said they didn't learn that in business school. And my experience over my years is the two things that have brought me success is my ability to foster trustful relationships and relationships that engender trust. So that's we're pitching this in a couple of weeks. We've been working on the curriculum, and I would love to come here and say, oh yeah, no, we're teaching this class, and there's some precedent because my wife Ann is teaching a class at Northwestern in the Farley School of Innovation, and the most unlikely thing, she is teaching storytelling to engineering students. How do they pitch? And she's giving them improv-based exercises, but also tricks from her comedy classes about them, observing human behavior and having unlikely conversations and having real conversations with people that maybe they, are afraid to have those real conversations with. And so far, the kids are just it's transformational for them because in the schools that they're in, they don't get any of that. That's some stuff that an English major might get or a theater major might get, but not these engineering kids. So that's been sort of transformational. I mean, this is the thing. I'm just so blessed because this work provides us with so many opportunities to do cool things. We're talking to a group in New York called Funny Girls, and they do leadership training for girls, grades 3 through 8. They use some improv. They're talking to us about scaling that program in Chicago
Wow.
to disadvantaged schools. So I'm coming back to you in a year and I'm like, we're working with these girls. The girls are teaching us so much. We hope we're teaching them as much as we're getting out of that. We're working with the cops and we're working with MBAs. And somehow all of that is going to connect at some point to
Yeah.
hopefully elevate us out of a place that is not so good right now. And we can also say that. We can also look at it around and go, not great, and let's make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm cheering you on. So I've done a little theater. I was telling you behind the scenes, I've done a little theater locally. Didn't start till I was about 35. I was
Mm.
blessed to do two shows before I really became a mom and then was home with them. But it's very transformative. So I can attest to everything that you're sharing. I didn't do improv. But there's
Hmm.
sometimes you got to improvise on stage when, we did scripted musicals, but at the same time, things happen, right? Somebody
Totally.
doesn't misses their cue or they don't. I did that in rehearsal. I think it was one of the last ones. I didn't show up when I was supposed to. That never
Hmm.
happened again, though, Kelly. Never happened again.
Good.
Never happened in the real life thing for the real performances. Do it while practice is happening. But it does happen. So I agree that everything you're teaching is incredible. For you listening, if you have a business, if you are on a team, bring this to your management and let them know that this is something that you want to have for your company because they, as you can tell, Second City has 65 years under their belt. They know what they're doing. They've put out many. Go to the website, which guides me to Kelly sharing because I want people to go to the website and just see all the talent that have come through your training and through your theaters. Can you share how people can connect with you and reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to secondcity.com and there's a whole bunch of stuff there, you hit the About tab, you'll see my podcast on there, which I'd love you to check out. It's called Getting to Yes And. It's done by both WGN Radio here in Chicago and Second City. We just started a YouTube page. This is a
Awesome.
new thing for us because we're sort of like, oh, I guess that's a place where we should be. So I'd love people to find the Yes And Second City page and subscribe on there. And I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm the easiest person to find. And if you're interested in this work, let's talk.
Yeah, and he's the nicest person. So
Oh, you're
definitely
very
reach
kind.
out. So much fun to talk to and personable. So thank you, Kelly, so much for spending time with me today. Is there anything that you want to share that I didn't get to ask you or we just didn't touch on today before I let you go?
When I do a lot of keynotes, and I always like to end with a favorite quote. And one of my favorite quotes that Dan Pink taught me. It's not by him. It's by Carl Weick, who's a professor emeritus at University of Michigan. And Carl says, a thing you need to remember is you need to fight like you're right and listen like you're wrong.
Oh, so
It's
good.
good.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's super good. I'm going to write that one down. So fight like you're right, listen like you're wrong.
Hmm.
So, so good. Well, thank you again, Kelly, for your time today. And I really am grateful. And hopefully, we can bring you back on in a year and celebrate all the success you're having in those three spaces that you shared with us. Thank you for listening to Kelly and I today. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a comment below for Kelly. Let us know that you're starting improv or you're bringing it into your business. And also, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or any other platform, please leave us a review, 5 stars, we would love, and share this episode out with your friends and with people in your network. Let them know what's available to them through Kelly with improv so they can start bringing it into their business and elevate because improv is going to elevate and grow your business. It's a given. So thank you for being here with Kelly and I today. If you are looking to up level, upstage your visibility and you're feeling stuck like you're doing all the things, but it's just not working, go ahead and download our free Spotlight to Scale blueprint. And you can go to spotlighttoscale.com/blueprint to grab it. It's free. Take advantage of it and grow your visibility today. Thank you again, Kelly. I am so grateful for your time.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.